It was a night colder than death itself. January 30th, 1945, the Baltic Sea was covered in darkness and ice. Out there, far from the world's attention, an enormous German ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff, sailed through the frozen waters, carrying thousands of desperate souls. Mothers with newborns, wounded soldiers, refugees, all hoping for one last chance at life as the Soviet army advanced behind them. But within hours, that ship would vanish beneath the sea, taking over 9,000 lives with it. The greatest maritime disaster in human history, and almost nobody remembers it. This is not the story of the Titanic you've heard before. This is the story the world forgot. And if you want to uncover more hidden truths and forgotten tragedies, subscribe now to Biography Plus, where history breathes again. The Wilhelm Gustloff was once a symbol of Nazi pride. Launched in 1937 as a luxury cruise liner, named after a German official assassinated by a Jewish student. Built for the elite, it carried symbols of power, wealth, and ideology. But as war consumed Europe, that pride turned to panic. By 1945, the mighty ship was no longer a vessel of joy. It had become an ark for survival. The Third Reich was collapsing. The Red Army was advancing from the east, destroying everything in its path. Hundreds of thousands of German civilians fled their homes, terrified of revenge, cold, and starvation. In the port of Gotenhafen, now Gdynia, Poland, a mass of frightened people gathered at the frozen docks, clutching whatever they could carry, praying to find space on the Gustloff. The ship was built for 1,900 people. That night, it carried more than 10,500. Children, soldiers, nurses, wounded officers, even teenage recruits, packed like cattle, suffocating in narrow corridors, standing shoulder to shoulder. The decks were so crowded that even breathing felt like stealing air from another soul. Captain Friedrich Petersen had orders to sail west, toward Kiel, away from the Soviet submarines that haunted the Baltic. But the weather was cruel, the radar unreliable, and the convoy protection too thin. Among the refugees, no one knew that deep beneath the waves, a Soviet submarine, S-13, commanded by Captain Alexander Marinesko, was already waiting. As the Gustloff moved through the icy darkness, her lights, against all naval logic, were turned on. A tragic mistake, meant to avoid collision with friendly vessels. But it became a shining beacon in a sea full of enemies. Shortly after 9 p.m., the calm of the night shattered. 3 torpedoes raced through the freezing water. Each carried a name written by the Soviet commander himself. One for the motherland, one for Leningrad, and one for the captain. The first tore through the ship's bow, flooding the crew quarters instantly. The second ripped open the swimming pool area, where hundreds of female naval auxiliaries had gathered. The third struck the engine room, and within seconds, the lights went out. Panic erupted. In the darkness, screams echoed through the decks. Mothers clutched their children. Soldiers tried to reach the lifeboats. Officers shouted orders no one could hear. The ship began to list heavily to port. Freezing seawater flooded the corridors, extinguishing every last flame of hope. Those who reached the deck faced another horror. Most lifeboats were frozen to the rails. Men beat them with hammers and rifle butts, desperately trying to free them. Others jumped straight into the black water, only to be pulled down by the heavy wool of their winter coats. Within 40 minutes, the Wilhelm Gustloff was gone, swallowed by the Baltic Sea. More than 9,000 souls, men, women, and children, vanished into the icy abyss. Only around 1,200 survived. The cries carried across the frozen sea for hours. But rescue ships were too far, and the cold was merciless. One survivor later said, "We could hear children calling for their mothers. And then, nothing but the wind." In the chaos of war, there was no time for mourning. Germany hid the tragedy to avoid panic. The Allies ignored it. It was, after all, a Nazi ship. And the Soviet Union called it justice. For decades, the wreck of the Wilhelm Gustloff lay forgotten beneath 150 feet of Baltic silence. No memorials, no headlines, no candlelight vigils. Only a rusting graveyard of innocence and fear. Divers who've seen it describe corridors filled with children's shoes, toys still floating in sealed cabins, and frozen echoes of the people who once dreamed of safety. It's a time capsule of despair, a reminder that in war, no one truly wins. Today, historians call it the Forgotten Titanic, a name both poetic and painful, because while the Titanic took 1,500 lives and became legend, the Wilhelm Gustloff took 9,000 and became silence. Yet, in that silence lies the truth, that every war hides not one, but 1,000 Titanics, sinking in shadows where no one is watching. And that is why Biography Plus exists, to remember what the world tried to forget, to give voice to the nameless, and to bring light to stories buried in the dark. So if you believe some stories deserve to be told, subscribe to Biography Plus, because history is not just about heroes and victors. It's about the forgotten and their truth.